when I ask GCs to create their value proposition for a board and I listen to them, it's almost like they're anticipating that they're going to be the GC on the board. I mean, the biggest mindset shift is you are not the GC on the board. There is a GC. You are a board member. Full stop. Done.
My guest today is Anne Marie Segal, the founder of Segal Coaching. She spent 15 years as a practicing attorney, including as deputy general counsel at a private equity and hedge fund firm, think the show Billions, with over $6 billion in assets under management, and before that was an associate at the large law firm White & Case. Since 2015, she's been one of the most sought-after executive coaches in the legal world, working with general counsel and senior executives across 6 continents. She's also written 2 books on career development for lawyers, and important for this podcast, been my personal coach, where she actually was the person among several that encouraged me to become a founder. So, a huge debt of gratitude. GCI would not exist without Anne Marie Segal, but very excited to dive in. Anne Marie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cecilia. So glad to be here.
Let's start with the moment when lawyers realize they're capable of more than being, quote, just a lawyer. So you've spent your career now 15 years working with people who want to reach that next phase. Tell us what happened when you made that decision, and then we're going to bring it forward to the present and working with your clients.
Sure. And I just want to make sure I'm clear. 15 years as an attorney and 11 as a coach. So footnote.
Love the precision, love the footnote. Podcast for lawyers. So thank you.
So, wow, there are so many ways I can tell this story about the transition, but it's similar to what happens with my clients, which is one day you say to yourself, after years of being happy or unhappy in the legal career, I think I'm done, or whatever comes to mind, right? But something that you feel, something inside you that needs to shift. And that absolutely happened for me. I would say that what led me to it, instead of what pushed me out of law, was meeting coaches, because I didn't really know coaches before this. I joined a mastermind. I learned more about coaching. It was kind of I always say it's like when Harry met Sally, I'll have what she's having moment. I toasted my friend that I wanted to be a coach, and she said, "Oh, you'd be amazing." My friend, a career coach. That was all I needed. I was on track. So
I love that.
Yeah.
It must be, I think your point about that it's a moment. I have these moments myself, right? Of like the first time I used a pre-ChatGPT version of GPT and just jaw on the floor, like, oh my God,
Right.
everything has changed. I got funny you said this about moments. My first job, my first like real kind of professional office job was as an intern at the Federal Reserve in the early 2000s in Chicago. I still keep in touch with the person that I was roommates with. She had a long career in tech. She ended up as a VP of sales at just a really hot decacorn. And I emailed with her last night. Now I want to take a little side diversion because I think it's super relevant on this like moment.
Right.
I emailed her last night because I happened to be selling to where she had worked. And she says, "That's amazing. I'm amazed by the growth and success." And she says, "Tech and I broke up. My goal is to stay out. It's hard not to be part of the party, but I needed to make the change." And she's doing yoga retreats, and she's essentially a solopreneur, but quite successful doing what she loves. So I don't know what happened, but she talks about it as a breakup. You talked about it as a Harry Met Sally moment. Is it a moment? And then how do you help your clients listen to that moment if there is one?
I think it often is a moment, or it's a series of moments, but it's definitely marks in time, right? When I work with clients, it's like I sometimes say peeling back the onion. I know that's a cliche, but really you're hitting milestones. Like the first milestone might be, oh my gosh, I don't have to do this for the rest of my life. You know, another milestone is when you realize that, a lot of people stick to being lawyers because they're afraid that they're going to fail at something else, but also that they're never going to make that kind of money again. And, when I ask the question, what if you could make more? It's like, I'm like, it
chills. I think that is right. And it's, people talk about like abundance mindset.
Right.
very hard. It is exceptionally hard because you've achieved a lot. Like by definition, being a lawyer, you have achieved a lot.
Right.
And so it feels like this, it's almost like investing, right? Where it's like, your hedge fund or whatever, like, are you going to take some more risk? And this is something that I interview folks for GCAI all the time. So we have about a third of our company as lawyers. And we occasionally do have candidates pull out because they're worried because these are not purely practicing roles. Obviously they have a legal skill set, but you're working with people, you're working on AI, you're working in tech, we've got lawyers coding. But they have that fear. So like what's behind it? And in that moment, is it like they should be so lucky and be your client? Or like how does it usually play out?
Well, I had it. And they always say people become a coach because they had an amazing coach or because they wished they had. And when they see what they missed, it motivates them. I would say the fear is in some cases mitigated by thinking about the worst case scenario. I go through this a lot with clients. Like, okay, so what's the worst case scenario? You have to sell your second home in Paris, or like a law firm partner, or you don't show up the same way that you showed up all the time before. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to take a step back for some period of time. Maybe it's 3 or 6 months, maybe it's a year, and breathe and like get to know who the hell you are because you've been forgetting, because you've been pushing so hard. Things like that are what come out of sessions, for example.
I mean, it's interesting, this abundance mindset kind of underlay of like, I had a coach one time tell me that it's like, or maybe it was like working mom advice or something that was like, instead of saying I have to go to work, it's like I get to go to work. And so you said something like, okay, you have to reinvent yourself. One of my professional idols, of course, Taylor Swift, she literally has a thing, like the eras, right? Of like, she gets to reinvent herself, right? She gets to like live different phases of her life.
Right.
And, okay. So you asked them, so I imagine that the Paris house question goes over like a lead balloon, but give us.
Well, I don't necessarily say that out loud, but I ask them and they come to it. A lot of coaching isn't me pointing fingers saying something, but it's like, so what would you have to give up? And then it comes. Yep.
Yeah. So give us a success story. Tell us about that, people you've seen had that moment. Obviously you yourself is a success story. So I'm assuming you're happy as a coach and you love it. Do you ever miss the deal junkie stuff from being at a hedge fund?
Zero. I don't
Zero.
miss it at all.
Not at all. Don't miss it at
No,
all.
I don't miss it. I thought I would. I guess it's just I knew very clearly what priorities were causing me to want to shift, which is in large part having more control over my schedule, which, when I had my own law firm, so I was at White and Case and then at Hedge and Private Equity Fund, and then I had my own firm, and then I tried a smaller, kindler, gentler law firm, which it turned out not to be. But, I kept trying to take trips with my family and then be working till God knows when, even as a solo entrepreneur, a solo practitioner. And I was done. Doesn't mean other people should be done. I don't mean that this is an evolution. This is just a transition for me.
So basically that like as a lawyer, our job is solving people's problems. What made you open up to let go of that?
So when I did my first coach training, they asked what you wanted to be most for a client. And I said, reliable. And everybody kind of laughed. They're like, you're such a lawyer, and it's true. Michael Melcher, who's a personal friend of mine and one of the people I met as I got into coaching, said, lawyers who become coaches are some of the best coaches because they know how to show up and then they have this emotional intelligence. So you need both pieces. And I don't want to say that being reliable is not important, but also I learned to not, as you said, not solve problems for people. So imagine if when I met you, I said, you know what? You don't sound happy at all as a GC. You should. And then I gave you my advice. It doesn't work that way as a coach. Yeah. That's not what coaching is about. It's about you learning what's inside of you and me facilitating that.
Do you ever get clients frustrated with the therapist thing of like, well, what do you think?
Oh.
Do you ever get clients? Because part of me, I will admit, and perhaps not with you, but with other coaches
Right.
or in general, where I'm like, can you just tell me what to do? Like,
Right.
I literally sometimes have that feeling. So what do you do in coaching when that happens?
It's interesting because usually the people who ask me to tell them what to do is on an intro call. And I'm like, okay, I've known you for 5 minutes. I don't coach. So I traditionally coaching is supposed to be all of that, arc of the coaching call and, at the beginning, figuring out what you're going to solve on that call. And, there's a whole lot of methodology around it, which some of us are very happy to learn because it's how we unlearn the lawyer piece. But then I explain to people when I first meet them, I'm also a consultant in some ways without that title, and so you tell me when you want me to jump in. I'll sometimes say, I'm hearing something. Can I give you what I'm hearing? Can I tell you, what comes up for me? But just take it with the spirit of, as it's offered and not that this is the solution. And almost, I don't want to say almost always, 80, 90% of the time it's right. But sometimes they're like, that's really not it. But then it leads them to what it actually is.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I there was a podcast with the chief product officer of Rippling, and he basically was like a similar question, except for in a venture capital context of like,
Right, right.
okay, and it's almost this idea of advice reflects the giver as much as it reflects the receiver, right? And so this, okay, here's what I've experienced or here's what I've done, and just sparking that thought. But it's the advice that he gave in that podcast was that as an entrepreneur or just as a human, when you've got this kind of like board of directors type relationship with a lot of people, is like figure out what you can ignore, take the good with the bad. Like the advice is about a moment in time of the giver's life, but also of yours. So I think that's how I've looked at it. Is there any? Do you ever not take on clients because you think that they won't want to see they won't want to see the light?
Absolutely. Um, I've never said to someone, you don't seem coachable, but it's very clear sometimes that people are not coachable because they're like, what I'm doing is not working, and I want it. I'm almost pounding. I'm pounding the desk right now. This is the way they go into it. What I'm doing is not working, and I want you to tell me how to fix it.
Yeah,
That's not coaching.
yeah.
So I've developed an intuition for that. I steer clear of those clients or potential clients.
Wow. Um, let's talk one more question on the coaching, which is
Sure.
a lot of lawyers have being a lawyer as part of their identity.
Right.
Um, does that, it, how do people grow past that? And do they have to? And do they have to get the big jobs, the COO or even CLO?
Mm.
Is there something that where they, like, is it an unlock, in other words? Like, obviously, if you're going to become a coach, you're going to become something that's not a lawyer. You got to move past that. But presumably, there are people that can stay with that identity, and that's just who they are. Is that okay? Or like, does it give us the benefits of seeing yourself as more than a lawyer?
Well, I'll go back to what is true, which is we're one of the only, or maybe the only profession that talks about lawyers and non-lawyers. So you already kind of start there. I would say you don't give up being a lawyer. Like, for example, I'm still a lawyer. I prep people for how do I talk to the board? How do I figure out what's material? How do I present myself? And of course, that's because I've seen that in action and when it goes well and when it doesn't go well. And I've had lots of clients tell me their experiences. And so I approach it as a lawyer in that sense. But I do think it's not that you shed being a lawyer. It's just that you shed some of that crap that we're fed in law school and in our early careers, which is that lawyers, and this is where I started, are so different than non-lawyers, and that somehow, like we're almost a different species, or we see things that other people don't see. My husband didn't go to law school. My son didn't go to law school. He's 22. They're always telling me, I saw this in the news and this is what I think. And often they're right. It's not like lawyers have a corner on that market. what changes is that lawyers need to think more expansively. That's really it. It's not that you're not a lawyer, but you are not only acting as a lawyer and seeing everything with the lens of being an attorney.
I mean, I think that's right. It's like I always used to tell my teams advising more junior lawyers, is like you got to be at least bilingual. So if not actually be a native of both kind of countries, business and law, you have to at least speak the language and, at
Right.
least allow yourself to be a tourist. But we're saying something deeper is like it's both and I would agree with you that people who are not lawyers, I've worked with many over the years that are basically better lawyers than most lawyers because they can kind of see the wider picture. They can think creatively about risk. One of our podcast guests, Matt Gipple, who is kind of a quintessential lawyer's lawyer, clerked, was was at Latham. I asked him a similar question. And he said the best kind of collaboration that he ever had was with an autonomous vehicle engineer where they were figuring out how to address a regulation that was brand new. And the engineer had an idea that no lawyer had ever thought of and turned out to be like perfectly on point with the reg and a way to achieve both the compliance that was needed and the technical requirements. And I think it is interesting. You're right that, I think the example you used in your book is like nobody talks about bakers and non-bakers. So I definitely a lot of lawyers love to cook, and I cook, but I don't call colleagues non cooks or whatever. Amazing, good stuff. All right, so that's a good context for what's going on in the legal profession. It's going through a shift. AI is taking on more work. We can talk about AI. Big law firms have been restructuring their associate pipelines. I think we crossed $5,000 an hour for lawyers, or even 10. But they're still in all these shifts, which are happening at the same time. There's a question of like, how are lawyers uniquely valuable?
So lawyers are valuable when they can solve problems that are not only compliant but maximize what you're trying to do. I guess later we'll talk more about junior lawyers and that, but a lot of people want to be better lawyers. And what I find is to be a better lawyer is when you have this expansive view. It's not that I'm getting better at the subject matter expertise. People who go to the general counsel role, for example, I always say there's a reason there's the word general in it. You don't need to develop subject matter expertise in every single area. And if the board asks you a question, you don't have to, my God, I didn't get on the weeds on that. Oh my God, they're going to fire me, which clients have said to me. At times they're afraid of that as they're going into board meetings. And, it's not, that's not what lawyers bring most. They bring their training, even though I disparaged it a moment ago. They bring the way they look at things and see things from multiple sides, not even just two sides. Sometimes it's more than two sides. They understand the underlying issues for policy questions. Why did we do this? They understand bright lines. They understand, just so many things that help us decide how to act in a business context. So I would say that's a lot of what lawyers bring. Maybe you have more things, but that's what I see.
Here's a number that's exciting. So looked at some recent data, 70% of senior lawyers at Fortune 1000 companies manage at least two functions beyond legal. Wow, that is a stat I did not know before I looked it up. So ESG, privacy, cybersecurity, compliance, government affairs, I've seen procurement. So the GC role, HR, of course, the GC role is becoming bigger than it's ever been. There's the CLO concept. I talked with Danielle Shear, who's Chief Trust Officer. So when you look at GCs, what they're being asked to own right now, what they're owning, why do you think that is, that the GC role is expanding?
I would posit that it's because GCs are damn good at what they do.
Let's go. Yeah.
I mean, if you want something done right, you give it to the GC. I mean, that's the way it is. And every successful business that I've ever seen, had the pleasure of seeing the inside of. So I would say that's why, and then GCs themselves are realizing what you and I have been talking about, which is, I don't need to settle on just being the legal function, quote unquote. So those two things.
Any and I don't know if obviously confidentiality and what have you, but any one of either your clients or folks you've seen in the press particularly jump out as a great example of a GC who either became a more than that or is managing many functions.
Present company accepted.
Ha ha ha. It is true. I did have Malin Yen on the pod. She's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
She became a founder as well, and then now she is runs a very successful venture capital fund. And similarly, she came from IP, and very good example of like, okay, lawyers, you can just handle more and more and more, and
Right.
you do it effectively. So yeah, that's great.
What I see first usually is a bolt-on kind of idea. I'm going to add business development. Like in your case, remember, you added business, I add this different area, I add this different area. And then somehow they wake up. Like I had a client, I was talking to her and she said, I need to expand my brand because I'm adding these different things and these different things. And, it was kind of like, it's not scope creep. At some point, it's like just a new thing altogether. And that's when I said to her, are you trying to get ready for a CEO role? And she was like, how did you know? At that moment of being seen.
Yeah.
She was afraid to say it out loud.
Isn't that fascinating that like I literally told so one of my friends, Amber Illig, is now an investor in GCAI, an incredible full circle moment. She was very interested in investing and in personal finance and venture capital and angel investing and started like a women's interest group of doing this at Cruise. And same thing. I'm like, Amber, I think you're a CEO. And she was like, wow. And she remembers that conversation. I still remember it. I was driving home and I said the CEO, like you're a CEO thing. And that was maybe 5, 6 years ago. And now she's like top 1 percentile of TVPI, which is a measure
Mm-hmm.
for VC, and she invested in us, so it worked out great.
Excellent.
Yeah, this like, and so I think telling people, giving people permission is a good thing. It really comes down to this like mentorship of, I'm always so interested in how people got into what they're doing. And I met someone who, one of our sales folks he has specialized in selling software to healthcare and pharma and hospital systems and things like that. And it's because he had a son who basically was in the NICU for some time, or special needs, needed something with his heart, and spent months in the hospital seeing all the different machines. And he's like, oh, I wonder who makes this machine and that machine. And it is fascinating that there's this just like, you can have somebody tell you what you don't see, or you can have the world kind of reveal something to you. I love that.
Especially when you're someone who's pushing forward, the kind of overachiever personality or warrior personality, because you don't stop and look around. But to some degree, it's developing an intuition for that. I mean, I'm not sure I would have been able to do that, 10 years prior to becoming a coach, 5 years prior. I don't know. I mean, I remember there was someone at the hedge and private equity fund where I was working, and I went down and I said to him, I'm going to quit. I'm sorry. I've really enjoyed working with you and everything. He said, I knew you were going to quit. I said, how did you know? He said, you pulled your kids out of private school and put them in public school. And I said,
oh, wow. Look at that. That's hilarious.
And I was like, well, there were other reasons. He's like, yeah, no, I know. But, that's my job to see trends. And we had a whole lot of conversations around this sort of thing. But it's just like everybody else was totally shocked except Richard, Yeah.
Fascinating. Wow.
So,
there are these people that just have that incredible intuition as well. Yeah. No,
right.
I've got a friend telling I've got my 14-year-old is a very good baker. And this particular friend is like, when is Alice going to open a bake shop? You got to encourage her to open a bake shop, do this, like get her to the farmer's market. And he kind of mentions it a lot. And I think she's going to do it. Like literally to the point where we were traveling and there's a bake shop in Santa Barbara called Three Sisters Bake Shop or something like that. And I'm like snapping the picture on Instagram and sending it to my kids. And it's like, see people that can see these seeds, you listen to them. That's amazing. The private school indicia is fascinating. Right. So what other trends should we be watching for? So we've got a lot of GCs on the podcast. You talk to a lot of GCs. This like taking on other functions is one.
Right.
Anything else that we should be out in front of from your point of view?
In terms of what GCs might be doing next.
Yeah, I mean, obviously AI is the big one, but there's probably, either other trends or other things that we should know about.
Well, what one thing I think of right away is GCs going for board roles,
Yes.
which
Okay.
is in some ways an obvious crossover, in some ways not at all. So I would say that is it a trend? I mean, it's still an uphill battle in a lot of ways, but it's making headway. The political climate has shifted a bit, and I think with that, it's been harder for lawyers to get on boards. Boards are just not taking as many risks. But that being said, there's they always need to. The way they choose a board, as you know, is they're replacing someone who's leaving. So they always need someone with that set of skills. And especially, it's not like I'm a lawyer, put me on your board. It's like I'm a cybersecurity expert, or I do crisis management. I've been through 3 or 4 turnarounds of companies or whatever, as a lawyer, but just in general, right? So that's definitely something to watch.
I mean, the stat that we pulled is 92% of GCs interact regularly with their boards.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I was corporate secretary in various of my roles. It is fascinating now when I think about what I want from a board member. It really is that, like, I'm going to call you and it's going to be a call that I want to make because I know I'm going to get value. I will get someone looking around corners, but I can see where the qualities that a great GC has of kind of like, I call you, you fix it, the solving problems thing, but also that you're someone who's seen those trends, who can kind of help me navigate an issue without me feeling like you're asking me for something. Like, I mean, I think
Right.
unfortunately that's how it works. So a little bit the service mindset as well. But yeah, I mean, for me, like I because I was involved in boards through you and through others, and then obviously as a GC, I think GCs can make great board members. The thing that I would not want in a board member, though, that I think GCs have to move beyond is the always thinking about risk all the time, and
Yep.
on that one, the data is clear. Optimists live longer, optimist businesses do better, optimists network more, they see greater returns. I mean, it's like the data is exceedingly clear. And that is one thing that I think I was evaluating essentially which VC to go with for one of our rounds. We were very lucky at our last funding round that we had a choice. And I'm like, I don't think I want a board member around with nervous energy. Like I just can't. I'm not going to do it. And so, is that the advice for GCs? Is to me move beyond the nerves, or like who are the ones that make that great transition to becoming a board member, or who seek out a board seat and get it?
So I don't know if it's always nervous energy. I mean, some GCs are very calm, but yet they are, as you said, risk oriented or downside risk oriented. They are not necessarily thinking of it's almost like so when I ask GCs to create their value proposition for a board and I listen to them, it's almost like they're anticipating that they're going to be the GC on the board. I mean, the biggest mindset shift is you are not the GC on the board. There is a GC. You are a board member. Full stop. Done. So you have to have the entire gamut, range of what a board member should know and think about and be attuned to, and you have your antenna out for all of it. It's not you're not the GC on the board. That's the same for a CFO. It's the same for some other people. It's the same for a marketing person, but it's kind of more insidious in GCs because that's where another myth is like that GCs somehow only add their value when they're acting like a quintessential GC. And so that holds them back too, in the GC role as well as in the board transition. And a question you haven't asked, but is a corollary, or it's kind of in your question, is what keeps GCs off of boards? And in addition to everything I just said, I think it's also just they're taking that leap of faith and then really investing. So a lot of GCs are like, I want a board role, and they're hot for 3 months and then they don't do anything for 6 months, and you know how that goes. And so you really need to let everyone know you are a future board member or board candidate, and do everything you need to do to get yourself there. It can't be, kind of just a wish. It has to really be a plan.
I love that. I mean, we in our classes, we teach classes on AI and we ask, how many of you have a AI goal in 26 or 25 when it was last year? And we'd get 90% of the people saying they do. And then the next question was, how often are you using AI for legal work? And, that number has shot up, but there were times I would ask that and half the people would say never. And it's like, well,
Mm,
okay. And then it's like, what is it? A plan without or a goal without a plan is a wish or something like that. Yeah, I think
right.
that's exactly what you said, where there is some work to be done. I think one thing I've seen, and I'm curious your take on this, is that you see very high achieving folks who, for whatever reason, have some fatal flaw. Like they talk too much, or are spacey or whatever. Like, because there's people where I'm like, that I've worked with, even as vendors or PR firms or what have you, where like they are good at what they do, but there's something that's like annoying. And so, like, I had somebody last week, a guy on the pod, and he said on his team he had someone who essentially executive comms was her blocker. She was very good, but the like ask a question, get an answer, like that they didn't do that. And he set a goal for her and they worked on it and they did it, and then she got promoted to GC. And so I guess, like, is there something, like, as a coach or as someone, like, how do you get people to have that self-awareness about it? And I think, for me it was, I think it was the role where I did need to not be a GC anymore. I loved being a GC. I really did. But what I loved was being closer and closer to the business and more closer to the entrepreneurialism. And so you kind of said, hey, why does everybody else get to be a founder and not you? Why don't you do it? And that was a confluence of factors. AI came out, and so it was literally like it was like you talked about moments where it was like handed down from literally like the heavens, this like once in a generation tech shift that made it possible. But I guess if people have a fatal flaw, or like, how do you even know if you have one, or is there an introspection process that is part of this board readiness that you talk about?
Sure. So this is one of the ways that a coaching relationship is so different than every other type of relationship. We talk about level 3 listening, where you're not waiting for your chance to respond. You're not, thinking about other things. You're actually really listening to the person. And so it's not exclusive to coaching. Sometimes you have someone like that in your life, but many people don't. Or if they do, the person doesn't know anything about being a GC, and so they just can't benefit from it in the same way. But so, for example, when I do interview prep, whether it's for a board position or a GC position or something else, sometimes if someone's talking too much, for example, one of your examples, I remember one time recently I asked someone the interview question, and she gave me the answer, and it was one of those tough questions. Why are you leaving your current job, or something like that? And I read it back to her. So I typed it all out as she was talking, and I read it back to her in this kind of monotone voice. So you said ba 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 ba, and I just kept going on and on and on and making it like. And then I said, "What do you think of your answer?" Because and I said, "Do you feel like you answered the question? Do you feel like your answer was responsive? Do you feel like it was convincing?" So I'm not telling her it's not. I even said to her, like, I'm just going to read it back to you, as if I was reading it out of a book or something. So you hear it without any of the inflection or anything. It's all a process of bringing awareness. And many people, when they hear their flaws, can change, and many people can't, and some of us are somewhere in the middle. And but if you want to be on a board, I used to say being a GC is like being in the Olympics or something, and being on a board is kind of like winning the Olympics, or, in the sense of like how good you really have to be to get to
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're going to have to fix some things about yourself. Everybody, not just the person who talks a
Every
lot.
level. And I think it was a challenge because at Amazon they had a very were very disciplined about performance management. People talk about it wasn't quite stack ranking, but almost. This idea of a fatal flaw that would prevent you from being a VP or AGC or whatever it is was very much a thing where, and, but how good people are, it's me at the company. I think about this a lot, like how much I can performance management, how good you got to be here in AI. You think, oh, okay, Cecilia, you're a CEO, you've reached the top. Well, guess what? Guess who I'm competing with? I'm competing with Claude, right? I'm competing with very, players with trillions of dollars. So I have to be that good, and everybody on the team has to be that good. Where, the difference between a good piece of marketing and a great one, Netflix, Reed Hastings points this out, it's not 10%, it's 1,000x. And so like literally this relentless, and this is where I think some of the self-awareness too of like, do you want to be in the game? Because it does require, a level of dedication and focus very similar to Olympic training. That same CPO of Rippling talks about it, where it's like, this is there's a sport of business, and you can win, and you have to be nimble and adjust very quickly. And now, of course, AI has thrown into all of it, right? Where it's like, okay, if you're a very good athlete and then suddenly you're competing against people with an Ironman suit and you don't got the suit, you're going to lose. Like you just are. It's like if you're going to do, underhanded, free throws or something, like you're just not going to win. And so like, let's talk about AI. That's a good transition to AI. So what are you seeing with AI, both at the board level and in the legal profession?
What am I seeing with AI? It's an interesting question.
Yeah. What's your view? Yeah.
So I recently heard a podcast that you were on, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was with, but you were saying, you can put it in the notes, you were saying, you were explaining what GCAI does. And I was thrilled and enthralled because you just explained it so well, and how it's different than just the kind of searches that you can do on your own, and just the way that it works. And I know we're not here to promote your product, but I think people who understand like, we can't just have AI, it's an LLM, right? You can't just ask it things and you're going to get the right answers. You have to really curate what you're asking. You have to be curious when you ask it. You have to know the right things to ask it. You have to know the things to tell it not to do. Like, well, it'll find whatever's most prevalent. So, is this the current view? Is it, is there any, more than me, all the questions to ask. But I think that's a very important element of AI, is the fit for purpose idea, which is what I knew GCAI was. But then hearing that podcast, I was like, wow. And she explains it so eloquently, I know why people are buying her product. I know why she has 1,000+ customers, it was amazing. So,
and how about overall, like, for companies, like, so at the board level, it's, we see a lot of boards talking about AI. We get a lot of legal teams reaching out saying, we've got a CEO level initiative, board level initiative to AIify everything. Do you see anybody? I mean, obviously we have a lot of exposure to legal teams using AI, but just in general, in kind of the world, what are you seeing for companies doing this well? And then, you've got kids that they're probably using AI for homework, what have you. Where does this lead? Put on your trend spotting hat. Where is it going?
So yeah, the thing that AI does best is really tell you what it kind of fills in your blind spots, right? It's very different. I would say once you are an expert, the difference between a board member using AI and a student using AI, a board member using AI is like, what either making their life easier because they're not taking so long to generate something, or, what is it that they haven't thought about so that they can fill that out? That's the way I would see board members using it. In terms of students, my daughter actually doesn't use AI very much. She's kind of, she did it in a summer internship. She's concerned, and I agree with her, that it's kind of bringing us all to like one conclusion. It's really easy for AI to kind of flatten things out when you need a lot of nuance. But that's something you just need to be aware of. I don't agree that you shouldn't use AI as a result. But students, I think, unfortunately, what I'm hearing is they're using it rather than learning, which is the other thing that worries me. Where are we going with that? But, again, it's just like any other technological advance. It's not like that means we shouldn't have it. It means we should be very clear about when and how and where to use it.
That. Let's talk about attorneys, kind of like pretty new attorneys. Let's say they're in their first 5 years of practice. This AI thing is a thing. Let's say someone's in big law and they hear this and they're thinking about a move in house, or they're thinking about their next move. We like checklists. Give us your checklist of what they should be thinking about in making a career move.
In terms of AI or in terms of generally?
In general. I mean, I think AI is kind of in the meme, right? Yeah. Because, sort of like there's data around less juniors being hired. I talk with law firm partners. They say they're busier than ever. So I don't see that, but just in general.
Right. So I had mentioned to you right before we started that when I heard that GCAI was at Clock, that there was a keynote speaker, Zach Cass, and what he said, and I think it was amazing to think about it this way. This is a legal operations conference, so the idea is, what is AI doing here? How are we thinking about AI? I didn't hear it, but I read about it afterwards. What is it that we wouldn't want to delegate was the thing that sounded so interesting. If we have AI and we can delegate almost everything, what is it that we as lawyers don't want to delegate? And the want is I don't know if that's exactly the word he used, but that's the way I think about it. It's not just what shouldn't we delegate? That just sounds so normative. But really, like from a creative, open perspective, what is it where is it that we bring value? And so that's the way I would be thinking about it, even as a junior attorney. Like, where is it that I'm going to bring value to my law firm and then as an in-house lawyer? I always say, why should I hire you is the essential question in any interview. And it's the same here. Like, if there are things that are, they're not going to hire you because you know how to do NDAs better than anybody else necessarily. Some places might, but those are the sorts of things that are probably going to start to get and are getting outsourced to AI. In fact, you might have mentioned that on your podcast, the other one. So think about what I sometimes also say, what's your genius? What do you bring to the table? And that's not a precocious question for someone 3 years out of law school. Maybe as first year, you're not really sure of anything yet, but that's where you want to start to hone as you're moving up and as you're thinking about moving over to in-house. And it's obviously a different skill set altogether. So to understand what that really means, and that's another place that AI can be helpful. You just type in like, what is the value proposition of an in-house lawyer versus a big law lawyer? And then getting into the details specifically about yourself. As an idea generator, there's nothing better. There's really nothing better than AI. It's not a thought partner necessarily, but it's a thought assistant kind of. But, it's just really, really amazing in what you can get. And bigger shifts as well. Like I was a lawyer for 17 years and now I want to be a baker. What do I need to be thinking about? And you kind of tighten up what your question is and give some more details. But, I go through that exercise sometimes with people when they want a big career shift and like, what would you be doing every day? Okay, so you want to be a baker. You love to bake, but what does it mean to be a baker or own a bakery? Like, what are all the things that you'll need to do on a daily basis. And you've seen this as you made the change. The CEO isn't just, well, now I lead it all. There's like so much else, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this like AI to draw out the reality of what it's going to be. And like, you said sometimes people just need to be told what to do, or they want to be told, or have someone say you're a CEO. Well, okay, like AI can do that. And then it's like, all right, the next step. And I think in my case for entrepreneurship, the advice I give all the time, people are like, oh, what's your advice? I'm like, one thing every week, one actual thing, a foot in front of the other. So you're going to be a baker. Okay. Like scope out a location. Okay. Start baking for friends. Okay. Make a baking blog. Like this, like do the thing. And like, I think that's what's hard, because I do think some people can get just lost in the planning or the dreaming or the wishing or the next year or the whatever, which is where like the actual act of like quitting the job to do the next thing. I will say that was one of the best things that happened to me was like, I worked with Amjad at my last company, and it was like, hey, you seem really into this legal AI idea. Is your head really in this role? And I said no. And then we found a replacement, and I started the company. And so I think that's good. I think that's good advice. I love it. So I'm an associate. I'm checking boxes. You know what the path of the firm looks like. Although, you can shape that too, right? There are people that have these really interesting niche practices and, are able to build those and lean into certain cases. You also get random stuff like, pandemic was a huge opportunity for people to step up. Or, I talked with one woman at a firm who, she just always, gravitated whenever a client had a breach, she would be on that. And then now she has basically a cybersecurity breach practice specifically, not just cybersecurity, but like what to do with breaches. And she's on the Rolodex of Kroll and all these others. And she's built that practice. It's a great practice. Did not exist before she got into it. It was just a kind of a generalized privacy practice. So you can do anything, I think is my,
I'm
yeah.
thinking about something as you're saying this, which is also you don't necessarily have to leave the law firm to go in house to do what you want to do, because sometimes it's just moving to a different firm because maybe her firm wouldn't have supported her in that, for example.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
instead of hitting your head against the wall looking for an in-house role that's going to match that, maybe it's starting your own
Totally.
firm or
Maybe exactly,
right.
exactly. And then, by the way, if you do your own thing, then you're an expert that the company that wants that is going to seek you out. And then you
Right.
can go out that way. So I love it.
Exactly.
All right, let's go to lightning round. A book, person, or mentor that shaped how you think.
Book. Oh, you can't see the title. The Wisdom of No Escape by Pema Chodron. It's she's a Buddhist nun.
Wow, Buddhist nun. All right, good, love it. And then something you wish someone would have told you before you became a lawyer.
Before I became a lawyer. Before I became a lawyer. Someone did tell me, and I wish I would have listened. Your personality is gonna change completely, and are you ready for it?
Oh,
Um,
wow, that's big, that's heady. I love
that
it.
was
All right.
heavy, yeah.
Good
So
advice. Okay. So, Anne Marie, this is a great conversation. I'm so glad we finally got to do this.
absolutely, thank you so much. It's great to see you as well. I'm posting your
Likewise.
success from here in Connecticut.
Cheers. Thank you. And I will link in the show notes. Anne Marie's got a book on interviewing if you want more sort of tactical advice. She's available at Segal Coaching. You can look her up or find her on LinkedIn. That was my conversation with Anne Marie Segal, the founder of Segal Coaching, executive coach to general counsel and senior executives across 6 continents, author of Master the Interview and Know Yourself, Grow Your Career. Whether you're leading a legal team, working inside one, thinking about philosophical issues around being a lawyer, or building the tools that empower them, head over to gc.ai and see how the most forward-thinking folks in legal are doing their best work. Follow CZ and Friends wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.